Wonderful. Well, welcome to the next podcast where I have Erik Huberman of Hawke Media joining me today. A friend that I've known through many CEO groups and YPO, and super excited you're here. Hopefully you can introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do.
Sure. Erik Huberman, founder of Hawke Media, which is an outsourced CMO and marketing team to about 500 brands. So go into different businesses, identify where the holes are in their marketing org, and then spin up different experts a la carte month to month to take over those aspects of the business. Been around almost a decade, run marketing for about 4,500 brands, just got rid of the top performance marketing agency in the country. And through that, we built out an AI tool that we took 8 years to build, and then apparently launched it right before the hype train took off, where we are actually digesting about 8,000 companies' revenue data, marketing data in real time, so we can adjust individual companies' spends, their performance, figure out where the low-hanging fruit is based on what's happening in the market. And then on top of that, we, about 8 years ago, started investing in a lot of the tools and ecosystem that we play in. And so at this point, we're investing in about 60 different marketing tech, e-commerce technologies. So we're able to be partners to them, help with the innovation side. So the real idea is like, we're the service side, we're the people, but we're partnered with all the different technologies and built out technology to also complement that, so that we're always staying on top of where the best performance can come from.
Nice. You know, it's unique. When I started in my business, like I focused so much on sales. I was sales. And then over time I realized, I think I heard the comment once, like, good sales makes a millionaire, good marketing makes a billionaire. And it was like a pretty fundamental shift for me to realize, wait a minute, like an entrepreneur a lot of times focus so much on that task or that next sale. And when you could step back and get into the marketing, all of a sudden you're like, wow, that's a huge, like, exponential thing. Maybe talk a little bit about your philosophy of sales versus marketing.
Yeah, I think, and it does make sense in that sense, but because I feel like marketing is sales, but one-to-many versus one-to-one. And like in the sales aspect, and listen, the type of business, you're going to need that one-to-one at some point a lot of times. But from a like top of the funnel perspective, it's a person going out and trying to meet each individual person that could potentially be a customer, making every cold call, sending those emails, et cetera. Or you put it out there and reach a ton of people through a marketing initiative, and then they come to you. It's just a different process. I do believe most companies need all of it, and you want a combination of everything of the above. But from a marketing perspective, I believe in the scalable, repeatable side of marketing should be 90% of your effort. And so it's finding things that are rinse and repeat that you can then drive projections off of and scale your business because it's predictable versus, a lot of people talk about the going viral or the cultural conversation stuff, the Nike and Colin Kaepernick kind of collaboration, things like that can drive brand conversation and get things going. But that predictability of like how much revenue is that really going to drive is really hard versus marketing specifically. There's a point where you can get to a point where inputs and outputs, where it's like, if I spend $1 over time, I should make $5. So let's keep ramping it up. We know the payback period. We know how this works. And so you start to know how you can scale and frankly, how you need to react from a product development base, from employee base. Like you can start to actually create projections across the board.
I think that's pretty critical too. So many people go in and they market, or they join a nonprofit, or they get talked into sponsoring a little league team or something like that, right?
Yep.
They have no idea what their analytics are.
Yeah.
They have no idea what to quantify. They think, if I got that one sale, maybe it was worth it or not. But not the soft dollar costs around marketing.
Yeah. And I think both work, to be honest. So like, I don't think like, again, the Little League sponsor thing, like if you know that there's some other parents that could potentially be customers, of this, again, taking out the fact that maybe you just want to give a bunch of kids some money to pay for jerseys. But if you're doing it from a marketing standpoint, I do think that sometimes just that, like, can I justify this with one thing that I'm confident is going to come from it, and then track all the other stuff and do the right sort of tactics to benefit from this and maximize it. I do think there's a lot to be said from a sales and marketing sort of budgeting aspect. We work that way, where it's like, if we're going to go sponsor a conference, let's say it's $25,000, we're going to look at, what do we need to get out of this? Like, to make that pencil, what does it need to be? And we'll go run the numbers, figure it out, and then we'll go, do we feel highly confident that we're going to at least hit that it's a really solid chance, and it'd be crazy that we wouldn't have that kind of success here? As long as the answer is yes, we still measure it to figure out how far over that, or were we actually right? But there is, I always say like marketing is both art and science. It's not perfect science. And so there are a lot of sort of like run with your gut, but have data to back it up and make sure that you're actually seeing those, because you don't want to lie to yourself either.
Yeah. If you think about an entrepreneur that's building or starting their business, I feel like so many of them get enamored with the idea of being an entrepreneur and don't put the practice of your analytics, your investment into it. If we're going to go sponsor a conference, we are going to know with high confidence what we are going to get out of it.
Yeah.
I feel like so many entrepreneurs say, okay, I want to be an entrepreneur and I want to, have my name up there. I want to sponsor something, but don't give any thought to it.
Yeah. And like what we do is we know that like very conservatively, we'll spend easily $2,500 to get a client. Okay. So if someone says, can you give us a $5,000 sponsorship? We go, okay, let's look at the numbers. What's the audience? Who are they, et cetera? With our historic experience, do we feel that we can easily get 2 customers out of this? Like, would it be a no-brainer? And if it's a no-brainer, then we're in. And then what happens is once we do it, then we look at how did it go? Did we get 4? Did we get 5? And then we'll turn around and for the next one, we'll go bigger with them and start to expand that relationship. But we'll start small, have a bar to hit that's really easy to hit, and then from there expand that and figure out the things to double down on.
Yeah, what's unique about what you're talking about there in terms of planning that out, that marketing spend out. Talk a little bit about the failures where you go and it's just like, what did we do there?
It happens all the time. I mean, I think that's part of what people need to be ready for. Like the guy that taught me marketing, a guy named Chris Nello, that really taught me about digital marketing. I remember like looking for the secret sauce. He's like, no, you just throw spaghetti at a wall. Like just be good at figuring out what's stuck. Like that's the part. It's about having a decent thesis up front of like, this should work, and then measuring it on the back end and figuring out why it did or didn't. Like, and then understanding that, learning from it and doing some other stuff. So, especially like I keep mentioning the event side, but on the event, sponsorship event side, there's events that seemed great up front. There's thousands of people there. I spoke at an event in Barcelona in February that we didn't sponsor, but I was keynote and I was on stage and I flew all the way to Barcelona for a day for this because I looked at the head count and was like, oh yeah, this is no brainer. I'm gonna go out there and I'm sure we'll get business out of it. Came back, I don't think we got anything. Like sometimes that just happens, and a lot of times that happens, and it's like that old saying about just be right 51% of the time. Like go to 100 events, if 51 of them are good, make sure your numbers support that. So you should be experimenting constantly, but some of those experiments have to come true. And I think all of marketing comes back to, if you have a good product or service that people want, something's got to work. Like it's that goes back to like when I was first understanding marketing. It's like we have to be confident that we have a product that if we get it in front of the right potential customer, they're going to want it. If that's not the case, no marketing is going to save your company. Like that's a big part of this.
Well, you go into the idea of marketing and sales. And to get the sale, you'll obviously have to have the trust.
Yeah.
The marketing should build that trust. In today's world, you have so many fakes, if you will, especially with Instagram and TikToks and somebody posting themselves on a jet or I can't tell you how many residential realtors are like, try to make themselves like they're driving around these crazy cars, which is funny to me because a lot of times I don't want to drive too nice of a car to a client and they want to drive the nicest car.
I've said this a few times on stage, especially at like agency conferences where they're talking about success in agency, and because in our world that's really bad too. Agency founders that like are taking pictures with their Ferrari, and I'm like, I don't have an employee that makes less than the price of a Ferrari. Like not the price, but the monthly payment on a Ferrari.
Yeah.
So if you're going to finance it or lease it, like I literally don't have an employee that makes less. So for that to be a sign of wealth is ridiculous to me, because it's like I'm hiring people every week, but this is what people think means you're wealthy, is that you wasted money. Not wasted. If you love cars, do it. But if you don't love cars and you're doing it as a sign of wealth, I think it's the most ridiculous thing. But I'd say it also attracts the lowest common denominator. Like these people are all talking to each other. No one else is like, no successful potential customer. Like you work with private equity and all these things. I work with a lot of great brands. They're not seeing me in a Ferrari and going, I got to work with that guy. They're rolling their eyes if I take a picture and something like that.
100%. Well, and I think that goes to so many things in life, and some of the things that we talked about earlier is you attract kind of what you put off. And so whether it's a realtor that's saying, I drive this Ferrari and so you should deal business with me, they're going to get somebody that's probably not the most genuine. And I see it even in, and not to pivot too much, but even and guys in marketing and dating, when I have a friend that leads with money, he attracts the girl that wants money.
Yep.
Instead of like the genuine, hey, let's get to know each other. And let's have a real relationship first.
Yeah, my dad was a successful guy, but he ran a waste business, and he had this like 200,000 mile thing expedition that would like turn off at this. I used to borrow it, and it would like shut down at stoplights. Like it was falling apart, and he would always go on, when he was single, he'd go on dates in that and tell girls he was a garbage man. That was his way. So I learned that lesson. I also heard stories from him and my stepdad, frankly, about like showing up with a nice car. They were both in real estate, and they both had these stories of showing up in a nice car and someone going, I don't want to do business with you, it seems like you're making too much money. And like, because again, people that are really frugal look at that and go, this is where your priorities are. And like, if you're making this much money and I'm about to pay you, I'd be paying you too much. I'm going to go find someone that's scrappier.
It's funny. I was around a mentor once, this big real estate guy in Orange County, George Argyros, and he asked me almost a trick question. He said, how good at golf are you? And I was like, honestly, I'm not that good at golf. I'm, 13 handicap or whatever. And I was like, kind of
That's
embarrassed when I said it. And he goes, good. That means that you're working. He's like, if you're too good at golf, that means you're not working hard enough. And I felt like I walked into a trap and I succeeded, but honestly, just because I kind of sucked at golf. Yeah. And
me too.
It's such a unique perspective of where somebody in this fake world that we live in, the difference of being really what you think that is going to get you more likes on Instagram versus what actual business people and entrepreneur care about.
Yes. And that's, frankly, like Gary Vaynerchuk and I have had this conversation because he's built such a massive following, but his following he knows like there's a massive part of his following that are entrepreneurs, everyday people that are just trying to look for motivation from a guy like him. And I actually think the way he's shifted his talks, it's a lot more like positivity and just getting people to be happy. Like that's what he's built. But his audience isn't a bunch of businesses. Like, and that's why like I don't have the big following, but the people I'm connected with are CMOs and CEOs and founders, and like that's my network. It's not like a consumer network. So a lot of people think like getting to hundreds of thousands, millions of followers on Instagram means you're doing something better. I know many people like that haven't turned it into anything from a business standpoint. It's a nice vanity metric. It gives them a little dopamine hit, but like that works. Like if you're, Kim Kardashian or The Rock or something, or Kylie Jenner, and you're going to sell consumer products through that, like then it's an interesting thing to become a media company in of yourself. But if you're selling something that is a very finite audience that takes this stuff seriously, they don't care. Like unless you're saying you're going to do that for them. So like for a social media manager that says I'm going to blow your company up on social and you have a large following, I see that as a validator. Yeah. But if you're telling me, if you're a real estate agent or a financial manager or something and you have a big following on Instagram, it's almost a bad thing to me. It's like you wouldn't, that's a tool that you're spending a lot of time on that you wouldn't need if you were that good, because I know how that industry works, and word of mouth and network and capability goes a lot further than a following on Instagram.
Yeah, I mean, my mom is a realtor and has been in Newport and sold all my friends' homes, and she doesn't even have an Instagram page. Yeah. But it's word of mouth. Yep. They go, Nancy Barfield is going to grind for me, so so this is the person you need to use. It's
word of mouth, and it's repeat business. People coming back and staying with you. Like that's where a lot of that success can come from. And again, I know I was on $1 Million Listing. I know those guys, and I know that world. And like, listen, they get a lot of inbound, but it's the smaller homes. Some of the big wealthy people like in that world want to know that like Josh Flagg or one of the other guys are selling their $100 million house, because they're also the reason they even ended up on that show was that. But like it's a lot of people trying to be them. That it's like, yeah, but those guys were all selling $50 million homes before the show came around because they're really good at what they do. And then the show was created about it. It wasn't that the show came out and then all of a sudden they're successful.
Yeah. Would you agree that too many entrepreneurs don't sit back in their marketing and go, who do I want to attract, before they start to go down that? They attract that dopamine hit or that number, thinking that's success versus I want to attract a private equity that's buying a company and knows that I'm going to compete against a Marsh or an Aon. And so for them to know that, we lead with like case studies and that sort of thing. If I were to track it by how many people follow me, I would look like a terrible company.
Yeah, and that goes back to, yes, you need to figure out, like we talk about vanity metrics. I don't really care about vanity metrics unless there's a reason. Like a social media following for most consumer brands is necessary just to give enough trust and credibility that people know about you. People don't want to deal with brand new for the most part. You talk about the adopter curve, and like early adopters that want to be those innovators that want to try something new that no one's tried. They're a very small portion of society. And so most people want to see that other people have tried this, that they like it. That's why reviews and testimonials and all these things, or case studies, are so important. They don't want to be the guinea pig. And so that part's a little important, building that out. But beyond that, what I do see is people, first off, vanity metrics, they look at them too much. And this is the problem, is like any industry, like I don't know the insurance side at all. I don't know that's just not my world. I'm a customer of it, but like I'm taking coaching from the person I'm working with. Like it's not, that's not where I go. On the marketing side, so many people don't understand this stuff that they're getting sold by charlatans all the time. The same people that are doing this social media promotion and claiming that they're super successful. I had a friend that actually created a fake private jet for influencers to take pictures on, and
I saw that on Instagram today.
And
it's a great meme.
And it's hilarious, but it is actually legit. Like it's not that we all assume these people are doing this fake to promote. No, it's they'll go to Van Nuys Airport and get permission to take a picture walking onto a jet, and it's not their jet, and they get kicked off right after that. But yeah, sure, take a picture. It's crazy that people put that out there. But again, these all get vanity metrics. It's not actually getting business. And so yes, you're not looking at the right metrics. Like how much money are you making? Like you're running a business. And who just said this? I loved the statement of, I think it was Gary Vee was talking about companies that are we're in it for our people, not for the money. You have to make money to spread your cause. Whatever you're curing in the world, whatever problem you're solving, if you don't have capital to do it, we live in a capitalistic world, you're screwed. So you got to make money. And that's what matters at the end of the day. Are these things driving revenue? Are they driving profit? And if you're not watching that at the end of the day, then you're doing it wrong. So that's number one. Number two, a lot of people confuse brand identity with target market. So while what's a consumer example of this is Shoe Dazzle with Kim Kardashian. And I found this out when I was working with them. Again, this is not working with them, but meeting with them, I think this was 13 years ago. They had Kim Kardashian as the face, very coastal woman, lived in LA, in the scene, celebrities, blah, blah, blah. And so that was their brand identity. It was very much New York, LA, fashionista. But their most concentrated customer were actually mid-40s black women in the South, because at the time there was actually the racial targeting too. And again, looking at that, you would think from the brand positioning, they'd get people in LA and New York and Miami or whatever. And no, it was all people in the Midwest and the South that were buying their products. And it was, that's a really important distinction to understand, that how you position yourself and who's attracted to that positioning is a very different thing. And so understanding what's the aspiration to the customers you're trying to reach, what are they looking for, whether it's your business and looking for, stability, security, that kind of thing. You want to position yourself that way. That isn't who your customer is stable, secure necessarily. It could be the most volatile venture fund that actually needs you more than anyone, is an example. But that separating that is super important. And then again, getting down to the brass tacks of, is this working? How much money are we making off these decisions?
I think that, I always try to take aha moments away. And I think that one of those is defining who you want to market to. And for you, as you're selling your services, and at the same time, so many people define success as the vanity, part of it. How do you redirect the conversation to, hey, you're hiring Hawke Media because we're going to make you more money, versus we're going to get you
we say that literally verbatim. I'm a very straightforward person. I try to build a very straight, direct culture where it's if you, we'll more ask questions. We want to, get our Instagram likes up. Why? What is the goal of that? Well, we need to build a business. Okay, but what does building the business mean? Because your Instagram, that's not necessarily going to drive you more money. So what is your goal in actually to build more Instagram? And we've had this happen where they're well, we need to because Walmart's saying they want to see at least 100,000 Instagram followers. We're oh, okay, well, let's go get you 100,000 Instagram followers. Yeah. Now it makes sense. Now it's not just vanity. But if there's not that second step of why, a lot of people just think isn't that going to drive business? No, not really. You can't really reach your followers anymore. So that doesn't really matter. So it's an after byproduct of advertising on Instagram. You'll end up with followers. People will share it. It'll happen. But we don't, honestly, other than the checkbox of you have enough to look like a real business, I don't think it's really a big deal to have those followers anymore. And so these are things that we talk through when we're on, like, upfront before we even start working together. And then so once we're in, we start with a game plan before we sign a client, where it's like, these are the things we're going to do. This is what we're trying to drive towards. This is the outcomes. This is what we're going to measure against, and make sure we're aligned out the gate. Because that's the number one thing with our business is communication. Like, thankfully, I have a team that's really good at marketing. So that's kind of table stakes at this point. They know what they're doing. We're measured. We've gotten every award. It's awesome. Like, they've done great. But we lose clients because of a communication gap, because of a misalignment, those kind of things. And so we really focus our attention on how do we bridge that.
Yeah, there's another part is, so many entrepreneurs think, okay, this is the dream, and then the execution. And the execution is
Yep.
as you know, running
yeah.
a company, it is, especially as you grow, that execution is just so critical in
Yep.
terms of what it does, and on a daily basis, and then who you're hiring to help you support on that.
Oh, yeah.
The last statement on the vanity thing is, I think that I've been lucky to be surrounded by some people far more successful than me. Every time I've got on one of their planes or their boats, they've said, like, don't put this on social media.
Yeah.
And so it's funny that
Yeah.
what you see versus the reality, the people that are actually the most successful,
Yep.
you're not seeing them on planes, you're not seeing them on boats or whatever.
Because again,
that
you
is.
know that it's like the only people that are going to be attracted to that are, like, I don't want to say the lack of better word, the lowest common denominator. Like, it's not necessarily, like, again, other successful people aren't attracted to other people that are spending money on this stuff. Like, they're like, cool, good for you, but it's like, enjoy your toy. Like, it's not like I'm like, oh my God, I gotta be like that guy. Like, it's just, that's not what happens. What you end up with are these people that's what it's the way our society is kind of built, is like, that's an aspiration for someone that, unless you're actually selling something that aligns with that, it's not going to benefit you in any way. In fact, especially in today's climate, it's going to hurt you. Like, I posted a picture. We took our executive team and some of our best salespeople out on a boat for the day to do, like, an offsite on a boat. And I got hate mail about it, about, like, why don't you spend more, like, pay your people better instead of just, spending all your time on a boat. And I'm like, what?
That's
like, they're not mutually exclusive, but that is the climate we live in. So, like, you're going to end up with that I appreciate that there's a lot of people out there that's like, this is my personal thing. It does not need to be out in the world. It doesn't do me any good.
This episode is brought to you by Entrepreneur Magazine and Entrepreneur.com, the one place to go if you want to start, build, and grow your business. It's unique because there's so much of that hating and trolling and negativity. I've heard you talk, and I'm a huge fan. I had this conversation last night about the happiness factor.
Yep.
Like, we run companies. I look at my people as family. And you come from, I'm still really close with my mom and dad. Mm-hmm. Talk a little bit about that happiness factor from two standpoints. One, how you think your parents help you truly appreciate that or mold you into the happiness factor. And then how you feel like the happiness factor helps you in your business.
Sure. I think my wife loves to remind me, I had a blessed childhood. Like, I grew up in Ojai, a small town. It was like growing up in a summer camp. I went to an alternative school that was like, your teachers were all by first name, tiny classes from like 7 to 16 people per grade. And it was on 150 acres of oak trees. So, like, legit, like, felt like a summer camp. And, there was just, my whole upbringing was really about, like, doing what makes you happy and not, like, just getting caught up in the, sort of the hamster wheel of life that a lot of schools, frankly, like the education system, a lot of times is just prepping you to be a great employee and be a soldier. And I heard something recently, I don't know if it was a rumor, about the idea that our education system actually came from the idea of developing soldiers, like the way we teach, which, again, could be rumor, apparently, like, long time ago, 150 years ago. But I do see that. And so I was brought up differently. I was brought up with this alternative, like, non-competitive upbringing. They were like anti-competition, kind of go to the beat of your own drum. Like, it was just do whatever you want to do, which I watched, like, the graduates of that school, it's called Oak Grove, all are doing very different things, but you have super high achievers. Like, the youngest deputy attorney general in California came out of that school. But it's known as, like, the hippie school, where everyone's just hanging out, and, like, the rumor, everyone smokes weed is a rumor. I actually didn't, but it was a lot of, like, this, like, tree hugger mentality. Literally, it's called Oak Grove. We're all called tree huggers in that sense. But you also have people that like stayed at the school and like now work in the kitchen now. Yeah, one of my best friends from that school dropped out our senior year because she's like, I'm not going to college. I don't need to finish, and moved to Thailand and opened a bed and breakfast on the beach in Thailand. Now has 2 half Thai kids that I think are 10 and 8 years old. Like totally different walk, but everyone's happy. So that's why I'm going back to that. So there was this interesting like upbringing from an education side that it was about doing what you love and being happy and not getting caught up. And so I had that. And then I think really the biggest awakening, still credit to that school, it was founded by an Indian philosopher, and they let us go teach in India for a month and a half when you're a senior. And I went over there, and I mean, polio was still, this was 2003-04. Polio was still a thing. I don't know if it still is, but it was then. So you've got kids with cardboard taped to their knees, crawling around, smiling and playing and having a good time. You've got literally like poverty here versus there is just, it doesn't compare. Like, not to belittle people that are struggling in the US, but India is another level. And it's actually cultural that if you are poor, it's because you deserve it because you were reincarnated as poor. So like it is crazy, like on a deep cultural level, how they treat poverty there. But they're happy. And so seeing that, you realize that happiness, and I don't mean to get too spiritual, but happiness comes from inside. And so like that was one of the biggest lessons in life for me, was like, and I remember consciously watching this in a train station, seeing people that were begging and but then going and playing and having fun and laughing and that side. And I was like, we don't need any of this stuff. None of this stuff, these boats and these Ferraris, that's not where happiness comes from. It's fun, but it's fun. It's not happiness. And I think separating that, and so going back to like how you construct your life, I talk to people all the time. Like, I think entrepreneurship kind of post the Social Network movie became this sexy thing. It wasn't prior to that. Like being a business owner was like sometimes kind of a nerdy thing, kind of a, like, it wasn't necessarily, some people took pride in it, but it wasn't this, over sensationalized thing that Elon Musk, like there were no celebrity entrepreneurs. Like now we've got Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg and all these people. It wasn't as much of a thing. And when it became a thing, I think a lot of people started pursuing entrepreneurship thinking that's what would make them happy. And you know this, I know this, like it's a struggle too. And I like one of my favorite quotes is work like most people won't so you can live like most people can't. I think there's a lot of truth in that, but the first part of that is super important. You're going to work like most people don't want to, and it's okay to not want to. And so I think getting very clear on what makes you happy and knowing that more money probably won't, and that honestly the chances of making more money as an entrepreneur is slim. And so like I talked to a guy literally this morning that got introduced to me by this program I'm doing with Goldman Sachs called 10,000 Small Businesses, that they're helping a bunch of small businesses figure it out. And
I'm a graduate.
Are you?
Yeah.
Nice. So I love the program. I spoke for it like 2 weeks ago, and the people are awesome. And I talked to a guy today that his business was basically profiting as much as he could get his salary for. And he was miserable. And he was telling me, he's like, it's so volatile and it's up and down. I'm like, would you rather just like have a steady 9 to 5? And he's like, I mean, honestly, like it could be nice. I'm like, well, you can get a job for exactly what you're making. And you've been this is not like a bad year.
Yeah.
He told me like what he's been making for 8 years, and he's been doing this for 20. And I'm like, yeah, you can definitely get that. Like you can get that salary and not have to worry about it, not take the stress home with you, go do your job, do it well, be happy, and call it. And I think, again, it's being aware of like controlling that. I think the worst thing that we teach people, and it's more common now than I think ever, is being a victim. Like this all happens to you. It's like you're a victim of your own decisions. So like, I'm not saying that everyone can be super successful. I think there's a lot of luck in the level of success people reach. But I do think that you can construct a life based on your circumstances that you do enjoy by making decisions that lead to that. And I think that's really important to keep that control and change your decisions, change your lifestyle, change what you're doing to continue to that happiness. And again, getting rid of that material drive for happiness, but like actually like, what do you enjoy doing? What do you wake up in the morning and want to do? Like find ways to go and focus on that. Yeah, I think it's the most important thing we can do. The pursuit of happiness we talk about in our country all the time, and people forget it, I think.
Well, a couple things. One, polio is almost eradicated. It's kind of funny. You drive into almost any city in the United States or really around the world, and you see like a welcome to Rotary. Yeah. Rotary is probably the single most like successful contributor to the eradication of polio. Huh. There's like a couple African tribes that still have it. They're still trying to get it, but amazing, like a bunch of business leaders that came together that are eradicating polio. But on that happiness factor, you and I have both had the opportunity to be around one of the celebrity entrepreneurs, which is Branson.
Yep.
And one of the questions I've heard you talk and me talk to him, when you look at when he's happiest, he's great at marketing himself, obviously. But when you're on his island, he's playing chess and he's playing tennis.
Exactly.
Those and he's sailboarding or kite surfing, which is amazing because he's like 72 and he's crushing that. But his happiness isn't from like, he won't even fly a helicopter to his island, even though like, because he's had too many friends that he's lost in helicopters. He's like, I want to. And what I really, I think, appreciated from him was the question of, you're so successful, like, what are you gonna do with your kids? And you have kids. I have kids. And I think that what he said on the happiness is, I wanted my kids to be happy. And his one daughter became a doctor, and then she realized, I want to spend more time with my family. So now she runs the nonprofit and the sons and a band, right? Like, and he's just like, be happy. And I think that's a cool happiness factor. Now, there's the happiness factor, and then there's the, like, as we know in some of the generations, there's the just like entitlement factor, right? You know, so what do you think was the difference between you growing up with a successful father and a hippie mom that gave you this nice combination to grind as hard as you do versus the amount of people that say, oh, happiness is, you know, being on a jet, not working, and, you know, whatever that is.
Well, yeah, and I'm pretty open about it. Like, my dad, so I was born in a small apartment in West LA, and then he became successful in the waste and real estate business. Started with waste and then went into real estate development. And so by the time I went from apartment, I think by the time I was like 12 or 13, he had the private jet. Like, that was the ramp. And so it just is an example of wealth. Like, he actually had it, and not because he had social media, but because he actually had to jump around California all the time to get to his different properties. But as a kid, you know, we were flying to Vail and flying to Cabo on a private jet with, you know, from like 13 on, we were taking our friends. So I grew up around like what, you know, and he was a huge car guy. He had a big car collection. But from 6 years old, he told me that I'd better get my shit together and get a job because his money's his money and it's going to the dog. And he's like, I remember 8 years old, verbatim, I told him I wanted an electric guitar so I could be a rock star. And I wanted to be like Eric Clapton because the only other Eric I really knew about. And he said, yeah, then get a fucking job. I'm not buying you a guitar. Go figure it out. And he created this sort of gamification of money and how it worked that I'm so fortunate to have, because I just took the idea of entrepreneurship for granted. Like, I'm like, well, that's what he did. That's what my grandfather did. That's what people around, like, a lot of his friends were entrepreneurs. So I just thought that, like, you get a job to learn and then you go do your own thing. So I just, from 6 years old, that's what I assumed I'd be doing. And so every job I had was to learn something. I was always trying to figure out the next thing I would start. I was that, you know, the lemonade stand kid that I tried to launch. I bought and sold when he told me to get a job to get a guitar. I tried lemonade, didn't make enough money, so I started buying and selling Beanie Babies, and I made like $4,000 as an 8-year-old, and bought the guitar, bought a BMX, saved money for a car. So like I figured out that money making, still with the idea of like I'm gonna go be a musician, but now I understand this business stuff too. And then around 12, I realized I just wasn't that good at playing guitar, so I should maybe focus on something else. But he hammered that into me. He called me when I was a sophomore in college. I'll never forget it. Like November, he's a hard ass, especially at that phase of my life. And he was like, "What are you doing?" Just like, I'm walking to class. What are you doing? He's like, no, but what's your plan this summer? It was November. I'm like, I haven't figured it out. He's like, you better fucking figure it out. It's time to get off the family tit. And hangs up on me. Yeah. Like, so he had that
Thanks,
little
Dad.
bit. Yeah. I'm just like looking at my phone, like, what? But you know, as harsh as it was at the time, like that put a chip on my shoulder. That was like, all right, I'm going to go crush it. Like, I didn't take it as like, and it could have been a balance. This is where the balance comes in. My mom would call me and tell me how proud she was, you know, no matter what I did. I tied my shoes at 16 years old. She's like, I'm so proud of you. Look how well you tied your shoes. So I had this balance of like hyper proud mom and a kind of a hard ass dad that like, because I think if kids are just beaten up, then their confidence goes out the window and you're not going to do anything. That's where you get a drug addicted kid.
Yeah.
But with that balance of like a super supportive mom and, you know, a dad that, after I started doing my own thing, really came around and then was a great mentor once I started my own companies. I think it put that chip on that, like, when I, like, again, I had a trust fund that I still to this day haven't touched, because my parents split when I was 15. My mom was concerned that there was a lack of trust between them, as there can be. So when I graduated college at 21, she was like, you got to look into this. Like, I don't even want to know about it. Like, I'm trying to build my life right now. I don't want to hear that I have money somewhere else. Like, I'm going to build my own thing. And I do think that allowed me to stand on my own 2 feet. I think there is a happiness in that. I think different things work for different people. I know a lot of very wealthy friends that decided their kids get whatever they want and they can do whatever they want. I have seen that have more bad outcomes than good, because when you have nothing to aspire for and no purpose, you end up looking to drugs, looking to those quick dopamine fixes, like trying to compete. And like, I was able to go build a completely different, I'm in marketing and venture. My dad was in waste business. Like we're separate. And then once I started making money, started investing with him. And there was like a pride and a self-sustaining thing that I was able to accomplish because of that push that I really appreciate. And so when we talk about like my daughter now and my future kids, I think there's a balance in there. I think my dad might have gone a little too far in the harshness, but I do think giving them helping them be their own person is really important.
That chip thing, there's haters at all levels. I had a buddy, Juan, who's on here, who came from literally like Mexico, as broke as it could be, and they were like, oh, you're just going to go up to America and be, just pick cotton, and they like basically like beat him down, like you think, and you would think they'd be all excited for him, right? And instead of the other way around. And then you have people that look at even myself that say, oh, your dad's successful. That must be where your success is. And a lot of people don't want to give credit, but I see you, like you're grinding, you're going to Barcelona for a day. You're leading your team through a pandemic when everybody thinks marketing's going away, or AI comes into town and all of a sudden everybody's like, well, no longer needed now. We're just going to build a ChatGPT marketing plan. That chip, you talk a little bit about your dad, but on a day-to-day basis, what makes you wake up and say, kiss your wife goodbye or baby goodbye and say, I'm going to go fucking do something great today? What do you think does that?
I kind of knew this, but my wife married it to me about 6 months ago, and it was like the epiphany of like, it's a game to me and I want to fucking win. And it's not about competing with other people at all. Like someone else is more successful in marketing or a better agency or sells their whatever. Like I'm happy for even our competitors. When I think almost every one of our main competitors that we started all around the same time have sold their companies now and are all hanging out and doing their thing. And I am no jealousy. And I'm like, good for you if that's what you wanted. Like one of our biggest competitors in LA, the guy sold it 3 years ago, finished his earn out a year ago. And he was telling me like at the time, like, you got to get out too, da da da. We were always like frenemies. Like, you got to get out of this business, da da da. I'm like, I'm doing fine. I don't know what you're talking about. And then now 2 years into it, he's like, now I have a non-compete for 5 years and I'm bored. Like at some point we got to do something together. I'm like, dude, I'm in. Like, you built a great company. Like, they're out. Now the company's falling apart. It's, cause he got out and it's not survived. But for me, it's really the game of like being better than I was last year. And what the business side allows me to have is a scoreboard. And so it allows me to go, not have I made more money, not because I want to buy anything. I'm good. I have, I can already afford, we're designing a new house right now. I can build a dream house. I got the toys. It was literally like, I could go buy whatever and I have nothing I'm planning on buying. In fact, you mentioned the golf thing. We're looking at joining a country club, and hopefully they don't see this, but I'm like now second guessing it because I'm like, I don't really want to go play golf every weekend. Like, I looked at my calendar in the next few months. I'm like, between work and other things that I'm into, like, I'm not playing a lot of golf. Like, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
So back to the point, it's like, this is really the intrinsic value of like just growing and building something. And like marketing world domination is really like what I always go back to. Cause like, to me, that's the win. It's a goal that will never be achieved, but we can aim for is like, I want to be the best and I want to keep being the best. Cause it's again, it's that purpose thing. It's back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where it's like, I have everything else covered, thankfully. I have shelter, I have food. I'm not worried about paying the bills, and I could stop. Like, not that I could sell my business today and retire. I could just turn it off and be good.
Yeah.
So like, I have that going for me. And back to like the familial wealth thing, my business partner's highlighted this because he comes from not much, and so he commented like, most guys that come from real family wealth don't have really any motivation to go build their own. He's like, the only thing this did for you was you have an insatiable appetite for risk, because what's zero? There is no zero for me. I can just keep going. And now I've created my own too, where we have a huge portfolio. I've co-invested with the family on real estate. We have our venture fund. We have all these other things that, yeah, this isn't about paying my bills or my daughter going to college, thankfully. I'm fortunate enough that at 36, those are checked. And frankly, my wife does really well. So I've joked about being a stay-at-home dad too, but I get up every day, back to the point, because I want to win. I want to build something. I want to see that we did better than last month and better than last quarter, better than last year, and that we're making progress towards this infinite goal, so to speak.
It's unique. That idea of happiness, the zero sum and competition. I like to see all my son's friends do well. My daughter's friends do well. So many people are like, well, my son's not doing as well as that person's son or whatever. And they get so wrapped around who's doing better instead of just being stoked for everybody around them.
Again, this is, I think, a societal thing. We're caught up in competition with others, which, by the way, there is a level of truth to how the world works with competition with others. But like, you mean the way you're graded in school, like what's your class standing? What's, how did you rank on your SATs? Like all this stuff, like you're taught to believe that for you to win, other people have to lose. And I don't think that that's the case in everything. I think it is in sports.
I think I'm about as competitive as anybody I know, but I, especially as I've gotten older, become more addicted to winning and having those around me win.
Yeah.
Like, I think that is...
The tide rising all ships. That's always the goal. We talk about it a lot. Like, Hawke Media is successful because of an ecosystem play. Like, that's how we built it. We built it off partnerships and relationships that were all feeding each other, and we all grew together. Our whole venture fund thesis is around ecosystem, where we can invest in something, introduce them to our ecosystem, and then we all continue to grow. And that's worked out really well for us. And it's way more stable. You mentioned COVID and volatile times. You do a lot better when you have a ecosystem and a culture around you of helping each other than a culture of competition, because then you are on your own when things are bad.
Yeah, we saw that with one of our competitors. Yeah. It's a very alpha driven culture and very sales driven. And during COVID, all those guys really struggled, and they had some lawsuits at different of the branches, and you see it kind of unraveling. And so during those hardships, that's where that ecosystem works. So what I love is like when I hear, an employee that didn't come from necessarily anything, and now all of a sudden they bought their first house and they're having their first kid, and those types of things are just cool as part of that ecosystem and bringing everybody up together and changing them. As you have hired and bought companies and integrated companies and done all that, what would you say in the last 10 years was your integrating companies, specifically around like acquisitions, biggest mistake?
Oof, it's been a few. I'm trying to think of the biggest mistake. We've had a few that didn't go well. I'm trying to think of. Yeah, actually, the biggest mistake we made was we were trying to placate to some buyer or sellers that wanted to have like a slower integration and like wanted basically a breakup clause of like, just in case this doesn't work out. And I relate this to any type of relationship. If you have a unsigned divorce papers on your table, just in case it doesn't work out, what's going to happen? Yeah. So that was probably the biggest mistake. Was we had a really good partnership that could have been great. I gave them that clause thinking like, yeah, what's the harm? Like, we've done this many times, it all goes well. And then I realized because we had that clause, it was a 6-month breakup clause. They spent the first 6 months with one foot out the door waiting for us to break up, which meant we never actually fully integrated. And then by the time the deadline hit, we broke up. We cut off the deal because it was like, we haven't gotten anything we need out of you. You're not fully in it with us. Like, it's done. And so that was probably the worst. We've had a few, we had another one where once the financials got integrated, they were very different than what we had been reported and things like that. But those are, frankly, we do it in a way that's pretty solvable. So nothing's really caught us too bad. That was probably the biggest lesson I've had in that.
My biggest mistake was exactly yours, where I felt like he should trust us. Yeah. We're going to do a good job. We're going to do good by him. Yeah. And we'll integrate at his pace because he wanted to fight everything. And then you're sitting there a year later and you're like, fuck, there's a reason why we are growing so fast and you haven't yet. Just please, go. And had we just integrated right away and said, you're a part of this now and this is what we demand out of you, and it would have been better for both of us.
Correct. And I'm very straightforward. So I've had those conversations many times with these integrations where it's like, hey, you got to go. Like, not go, leave, but it's time to go. We got to integrate. We got to get this done. Like, we did this deal because we grow faster than you do, and I want you to grow as fast as we do. Yeah. So it's stop telling me that your way is better than ours, because objectively it's not. Like, I'm here to learn from, there's probably some things you do that are better. There's no ego in this. I'm sure you have some stuff to teach me. Let's integrate, get that done. But all the basics that I've had people push back on these integrations of just the HR side, porting the employees over. And I'm like, no, we're not running 2 payroll systems. it's done. And so some of it is just at some point having to be that. That doesn't happen that often, though. It's usually a more cultural conversation of like, hey, like, let's slowly do this. Let's, lay out a plan and set expectations. But like, we need to get, finance and HR integrated in the next 2 months. We need to do this, and this. And so that if you set up the expectations properly and give them an upfront chance to push back and talk through it, usually it's pretty decent. But then once in a while, you get a little bit of friction on a specific thing.
It's excuses on why people aren't successful, why relationships aren't successful, why your kids aren't successful.
Yep.
What have you found the best way around just excuses? Because anybody, and as you know, as a high performer, that we try to eliminate excuses.
Yep.
And so what do you do when you're dealing with somebody that continues to deliver those?
I stop working with them. There's a type of person that's just gone too far on the victim side of things that like I generally will just try to part ways with that person if it's that far. If I've tried a few times. A lot of times, like, even I think we all get caught up at some point with like, it's not all in my control. Like even with your business, like how did the economy affect your business last year?
We're a lagging indicator with insurance.
Yeah, got it.
And thankfully we tend to attract those that are growers, not like
fair
legacy type stuff. So those type of businesses have thrived in this moment.
Fair enough.
As you know, a lot of people in the pandemic said, oh shit, the world's ending. Yeah. I'm going to go home and drink.
Yeah.
And then there's others that were like, oh wow, we better do something. And this is the greatest opportunity we've seen in our lifetime.
Yeah.
And for us, we thought of it as the greatest opportunity we were going to see.
We did the same thing. It's funny you say that. I stopped drinking the day COVID hit.
Yeah, I wish I would have. I've now since stopped drinking.
I've had a few since. Like I've had a week and a Bisa and stuff like that. That was fun. But I haven't had a drink in like a year. And not because of anything other than I need to focus. I don't want to hang over. Let's go do that. But it's when you talk about the people that have that victim mentality, sometimes it is just, I like asking questions as my argument strategy. It's just like, okay, so you think that the reason you're not selling is because the economy. Yeah. Well, then why is that guy and that girl doing just fine? They're in the same economy, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So why are they doing fine and you're not? Well, because because they're getting these leads. Okay. Why aren't you getting those leads? Well, because, and you just go down the path of like, lead them to telling you exactly what you frankly, like lead them to telling you the answer. And then you're like, okay, so it really does come down to you didn't go to these things and you could be, right? Or could you do it? Are we stopping you? And so it's those conversations. It's like lead them to answering the question for you. It's like, yeah, so we're on the same page again. And that tactic works really well because it forces them to think through exactly where you want to end them up.
In that short term, there was such a, the quiet quitting and all that, a desire for talent that owners and managers had to settle for what they could get. Mm-hmm. And now it's flipped.
Yep.
It's 100% flipped where those that were not working, those that were giving up or whatever, are exposed.
Yep.
And they're in a world of hurt. And now they're probably going to say, well, I deserve something. And so that those that grinded are so far ahead right now.
Yep. And even we tell our employees at Hawke, the rich get richer. On the sales side, it's compounding. We send the leads to the people that close, like the rich get richer. On the servicing side, the people that do great by their clients get more clients, bigger clients. We pay bonuses based on them retaining clients. And so our best talent on both sides are making a ton of money. And then we've got people that took a 10%, 5% pay bump to jump on another company that then laid them all off 6 months later. And I watch it because honestly, there's a little bit of are we doing something wrong? Or it's the same thing when you get
It's hard not to question it.
It's hard not to question it. And it's like the same thing when you get a hater on social media or something where it's like, someone giving you crap. You're like, did I make a bad decision? As much as rationally you shouldn't listen to this crazy troll, you got to question it. You question it a little bit. And I watch what happens to our people that jump ship. And I'd say 90% of the people that leave our company end up leaving the next company within 6 months.
We see it all the time.
Yeah.
Unless they went somewhere where they can get away with it.
Right.
And some of our competitors are so unaware or unfocused or scared that they let them get away with it. And that's why you see so much aggregation to the top and so much opportunity for us because they have all these inflated payrolls. And honestly, one of our competitors hires all of our worst, because the people that will go work for them are the ones that go, yeah, I don't really want to work that hard versus I don't have it good here. Our best employees have it good here.
Yeah.
Your best employees have it good there.
Exactly.
My worst employees probably don't have it as good because they're not that good.
Well, here's the unpopular opinion. You see the layoffs at all the tech companies, and everyone's like, oh, there's some great talent running around, and I'm going to probably get some hate mail for this. But is it? Because, like, when you go to cut people, you don't pick your best people.
No.
Like, the only time I think that happens is when you actually cut an entire initiative. If, like, Google gets out of the advertising business, there'd probably be some good talent. But, like, when it's not literally, like, shuttering a department, and it's just, like, you know, Facebook saying we're cutting 10% of our staff, like, it's probably the 10% least performing part of their staff.
To the same thing, I lecture at Long Beach State, and I always say this, and I offend the 10% that don't have a job. I said, if you don't have a job, we don't want to hire you because the best people already have a job. And we want to go hire the best at that. And there's always circumstances.
Totally. That's what I'm saying. There's exceptions. There's people that leave their job because they really don't like it.
But for the most part, when I see open to work and they've been unemployed for 3 to 4 months, I'm like, there's something wrong there.
Yeah. And again, it just had this. I had someone teed up for me with an interview that I saw, like, they had 5 jobs before applying to us, and they were it was like 3 months, 5 months, 7 months, 3 months, 5 months. And I was like, why am I interviewing this person?
Why
what
waste your time?
And so I've said it over and over again to my team, don't hire those people. This was a recent example of maybe them not following that process. So I'm going to be talking about that again.
Yeah. If you were to give, you know, for those that are trying to grow, what would be your one piece of advice from a marketing standpoint?
I mean, we put out a book that was a bestseller last year called The Hawke Method, and we talk about there's 3 pillars of marketing: awareness, nurturing, and trust. You need to be covering those 3 pillars. Awareness is just how do you get your brand out there and make sure that you're always introducing your company to new potential customers. Just constantly be filling that funnel, because by nature you will lose business, you will lose customers. And I always say, like, if you don't believe that, like, we all have a finite lifespan. Like, at some point, you're losing people in some way. People change jobs, change locations, whatever it is, you're going to lose. You have to fill the top of the funnel to grow or even maintain, because you're going to lose people. Number 2, nurturing. What do you do after they're aware you exist to actually convert them to a customer and then keep them as a customer and keep them buying? And so that's, you know, from a marketing side, we use things like email marketing, SMS, content, all sorts of things. The idea there that people miss, the like crux of like where I see companies not understanding, is purchase cycle or sales cycle. Really easy to understand when you're running a sales business because your people are talking to that person and understand. Usually sales cycles are a very common thing to talk about, but in marketing, everyone thinks they look at their like ad spend this month and their revenue from it this month. And that is so misleading, because we've seen even in e-commerce, like a $50 average purchase takes 3 weeks, $100, 5 weeks, $200, 6 weeks. So if you're measuring it on a weekly basis or a daily basis, and it's taking weeks to months to sell something, you're already screwing up your marketing. So nurturing is the second one. And then trust is also brand, but before you've built a brand that people know, you've got to find third-party validation to build trust. So that's, you know, PR, that's influencers, testimonials, reviews. One of my favorite things to do now, because I did it I speak a lot and I did it on stage somewhere, and I just kept doing it because to explain this, it's like show of hands how many people buy things on Amazon. And generally in the US, it's everyone. And then you go, okay, show of hands, how many you, like, once in a while at least, look at a review on Amazon, like look at how many stars it has, or like a review was on Amazon to see if you should buy it. Almost everyone raised their hand. And now show of hands, how many of you believe that most of the reviews on Amazon are fake? Almost everyone raises their hand. It's like, isn't that fascinating? You guys don't already know consciously that you're looking at BS, but you still look for some sort of validation to make that purchase. And as soon as you can check that box, you do it. Why that is? People are emotional creatures. They're looking for logic to justify their emotions. I want that product, but I got to be careful. Oh, the reviews are good. I'm good. Yeah. And it's that kind of thing. So understanding those dynamics and making sure you're doing things with your business to cover all 3 of those, that's the key to marketing. It's modern marketing 101. Back to reviews. Best review I got on the book, which the guy deleted because I think he heard me talking about him, but it was a 1-star review the first day on Amazon that's like, I don't get it. This is just modern marketing 101 on our book. And I was like, nope, that's exactly what it is. But it is just keep that simple framework. And then from there, how you do all those things is where the complexity comes in. But awareness, nurturing, trust, cover those bases, and you'll probably do all right.
Nice. And then we always end the podcast with you get one question for me.
One question for you. I would say one of my favorite questions is, what's one piece of advice you either got or wish you got that helped you to get to where you are? Like, if for anyone that's trying to achieve their dreams, get to the top of their industry, to be successful, again, whether it's entrepreneurial or even a musician or whatever, what do you think something that kept you going and got you there? Or you wish you heard that you've learned now?
Yeah, it took till last year. All of a sudden one of my buddies kind of looked to me and he said, excuse my language, he's like, why are you such a pussy? And I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, you're the most competitive guy I know. You're athlete, you'll fully focus. He's like, why is your company so small, relatively speaking? And I was like, his name's Danny. I was like, I don't know, Danny. He's like, fucking go. Like go, stop it. And I was like, okay, like here I am going through the motions, doing what I think I am, being successful. And it took a guy with a lot more than me to go like, quit being a pussy and go. And I was like, all right, I need to put this in place now. It was more of like a shake of like, not complacent, because I wouldn't describe myself as complacent, but I probably had become a little bit complacent where I thought I was achieving success, and he was looking at me like, YPO in my forum, I'm like the small guy in my forum, and they're all kind of like, why are you the small guy in the forum? You're the most competitive alpha of all of us. What the hell's wrong with you? And it made me switch a little bit, and I probably was focused on the wrong things. I think that it allowed me to go, I'm going to focus on really, three main things. And for me, it was my personal health and wellness, which I always had, but I stopped drinking a lot less, and started running again. I focused much more intently on business from that standpoint. And then kind of the basis was I always have my kids that are like my grounding, like TJ and Alexa, or what I do, why I do. And those three, once I started to eliminate a lot of the noise, a lot of the negativity, it was like, all right, let's go.
Love it. That's good advice. Sometimes you need that outside push. I think everyone thinks that, like, I had someone say it to me the other day, because we've been around just about 10 years, and they laughed. They're like, oh, so a decade-long overnight success? Like, it takes a while. You need outside help. No one gets there alone. And sometimes it takes someone else snapping you out of it to be like, oh, yeah, time to go. Yeah.
That hockey stick growth comes from going from sales to a marketing organization, going from me to us, and then taking more risks. Taking more risk even as a successful business owner. It's so easy, to be like, we're doing pretty good, let's keep going and let's keep working hard. And then you go, well, let's take a risk. Let's go hire X, Y, and Z outside of our comfort zone and see what happens.
100%. And you got to take a few of those and hope, again, a lot of them work out. And I also think it has to do with where you're setting the expectation. Because like you mentioned, like, you're successful and your measurement of success is what you had. And then you're around guys that their measurement of success is a lot bigger. So they're looking at you, what do you mean you're successful? You're just starting. You're the smallest guy here. Like, they talk about like being around people that help push you. Like, that helps a lot when you're around people that you're like, I'm here, but like, I could be there and these guys are there and they're not smarter than me. Like, why am I not pushing? And so, I mean, for us, one of the things that drove our growth the most was setting goals that were to grow. Like, it was like, we're going to try to get there. And then we aim for that. And when you're falling short, you adjust your plan. If you're not aiming for that, then you're just going to do it. You're going to run the motions.
Yeah. It's so critical to take that huge, this is what we're actually going to do, not we're going to grow by 15 or whatever.
Yeah.
Putting a number that's a stretch number and say, I'm actually going to do that. And this is what I need to do it. And then executing on that.
Yeah. The example I always give, like, our first year goal was $1 million. And we wanted to do 1, 2.5, 5, 10 was our first 4 years. And we came within 1% of every one of them, which I don't think that was a miracle or like some magic work we did. It's because if we were behind by 10%, I'm going to do everything I can to juice it up. The moment we started being on track, well, you take your foot off the gas a little bit, honestly. And so you end up coming right in where you're supposed to. Now, listen, as you get bigger, it becomes harder to just call your shot. But there's a certain stage of the business when you're driving a lot of it as an entrepreneur, that it's really where you're aiming is where you're going to hit. Yeah.
Well, thanks for spending time with me today. I really appreciate it. Excited for you to drive down and to go through this. And it was really insightful.
No, it's good to see you. It's fun to come by. Thank you.
All right, bud. Thanks.